What is really happening right now is not what most people think it is, and the deeper you look into this conflict, the more you realize that we are not witnessing a simple war, but a complete transformation of modern warfare and global power balance. Because from the very beginning, Iran has made it clear through its actions, not its words, that this is not about ending the war quickly, but about reshaping the conditions of future wars, about creating a level of deterrence so strong that no nation would dare to repeat this scenario again. And that changes everything, because it means every strike, every response, every delay is calculated with long-term consequences in mind rather than immediate results. And that is exactly why the situation appears confusing on the surface, because what looks like weakness may actually be strategy, and what looks like escalation may actually be restraint. And this is where most mainstream analysis completely fails to understand what is unfolding right now. And if you want to truly understand these hidden dynamics, make sure you subscribe to From Report, because what you are about to hear goes far beyond what traditional media is willing to explain. When we talk about the effectiveness of US and allied operations, the official narrative suggests overwhelming success, massive destruction of missile systems, severe degradation of Iran's capabilities, but the reality on the ground tells a more complicated story, because while the number of missiles being launched has significantly decreased, that does not automatically mean Iran has lost its ability to strike. It may instead indicate a deliberate shift in strategy toward precision warfare, where fewer missiles are used, but each one is chosen carefully to maximize impact. And this is supported by what we are seeing in the field, where targets are being hit with increasing accuracy and devastating effect, contradicting earlier claims that Iranian systems lack precision. And in modern warfare, precision matters far more than quantity, because a single accurate strike can achieve what dozens of inaccurate ones cannot. At the same time, we have to consider the possibility that the early phase of this conflict was designed to exhaust defensive systems, because launching large volumes of missiles forces air defense networks to respond, and each interception consumes valuable resources. And once those resources begin to run low, the defensive shield becomes weaker, creating opportunities for more effective strikes later on. And if this was indeed part of Iran's strategy, then what we are seeing now is not a reduction in capability, but the beginning of a second phase, a phase where efficiency replaces volume and where every move is calculated with surgical precision. And this kind of thinking reflects a level of military planning that is far more advanced than many expected. And while all of this is happening, there is another dimension that cannot be ignored, the psychological dimension, because war is not only fought on the battlefield, but also in the minds of decision-makers and populations, and by maintaining the ability to strike while appearing to hold back, Iran creates uncertainty, and uncertainty is one of the most powerful weapons in modern conflict, because it forces the opponent to prepare for multiple scenarios at once, stretching resources, increasing stress, and complicating strategic planning. And this uncertainty is amplified by the fact that there is no clear evidence that Iran is running out of weapons. In fact, most estimates suggest they started with a massive stockpile far larger than what has been used so far, meaning the perception of depletion may be misleading. Now, as the conflict continues to evolve, we are seeing a shift toward more calculated and targeted operations, with Iran relying heavily on surveillance data, drone reconnaissance, and satellite imagery to assess damage and select targets. And this indicates a transition from reactive warfare to proactive strategy, where actions are based on real-time intelligence rather than immediate retaliation. And this level of coordination suggests a highly organized command structure capable of adapting quickly to changing conditions, which again challenges the idea that Iran is in a weakened position. And if you are still watching at this point, it means you are looking for deeper understanding. So take a moment to subscribe to From Report, because this is exactly where complex geopolitical realities are broken down in a way that actually makes sense. But perhaps the most critical aspect of this entire situation is what could happen next. Because despite the damage already inflicted, there are clear signs that Iran is holding back significant capabilities, waiting to see how events unfold. And this introduces a dangerous level of unpredictability, because if certain red lines are crossed, the response could be far more intense than anything we have seen so far, particularly when it comes to energy infrastructure in the Gulf, which remains one of the most vulnerable and strategically important targets in the world. And any large-scale attack on that infrastructure would have immediate global consequences, affecting oil supply, energy prices, and economic stability across multiple continents. At the same time, discussions about a potential ground invasion highlight another major shift in modern warfare, because unlike previous conflicts, deploying large numbers of troops is no longer as viable as it once was, due to the constant presence of surveillance systems and the widespread use of drones, which can detect and target movements with unprecedented accuracy, making traditional military strategies far more difficult to execute. And this means that even the most powerful armies face significant challenges when operating in such environments, especially against an opponent that has adapted to these new conditions. In addition to that, there is the broader geopolitical impact to consider, because this conflict is not happening in isolation. It is influencing global alliances, economic stability, and strategic planning across multiple regions. And one of the clearest examples of this is the situation in the Strait of Hormuz, a critical choke point for global energy supply, where even the threat of disruption can have significant consequences. And Iran has multiple ways to exert pressure in this area, from drones and missiles to naval tactics that could limit or control maritime traffic. And this creates a constant state of tension that affects global markets and decision-making at the highest levels. And as energy prices fluctuate and supply chains become more fragile, the economic impact of this conflict begins to spread far beyond the region, affecting countries that are not directly involved but are heavily dependent on stable energy flows, particularly in Europe and Asia, where even small disruptions can lead to significant economic challenges. And this highlights the interconnected nature of modern geopolitics, where regional conflicts can quickly become global issues. At this point, it becomes clear that the biggest problem is not just the conflict itself, but the lack of a clear long-term strategy to resolve it. Because without a defined objective, military actions risk becoming reactive rather than purposeful, leading to prolonged instability and increasing the likelihood of unintended consequences. And history has shown that wars without clear strategies tend to last longer and cause more damage without achieving meaningful results. And this brings us to a crucial question: what kind of resolution is even possible in a situation like this? Because any agreement would have to address not only the immediate conflict, but also the underlying tensions that led to it, and that is a much more complex challenge than simply negotiating a ceasefire, especially when both sides are operating based on long-term strategic goals rather than short-term gains. As we move forward, one thing is becoming increasingly evident. The global balance of power is shifting, and this conflict is accelerating that shift in ways that are not yet fully understood, because it is revealing new realities about military capabilities, strategic planning, and geopolitical influence. And these revelations will likely shape international relations for years to come. So the question is no longer just about who wins or loses this conflict, but about how the world will look once it is over, and whether the systems and alliances that have defined global politics for decades will remain intact or be replaced by something entirely different. And if you want to stay ahead of these changes and truly understand what is happening behind the scenes, make sure you subscribe now to From Report, because the next developments in this story could redefine everything we think we know about global power.